This is Asian Insider, and I'm Nirmal Ghosh. Now, protests in Thailand demanding resignation of the government and, more critically, reform of the monarchy have been around since mid to late July, but have now deepened considerably and escalated to a crisis point. The government has been progressively cracking down. It has imposed a state of emergency. Its latest target this past week, has been the media. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has refused to resign. And we should note that while the government is an elected one, Prime Minister Prayut is a former general who, as army chief, removed an elected government in a coup d'etat in 2014. As we have discussed before on Asian Insider, this round of protest and unrest is over pent-up grievances and is also distinctly different from previous ones. Unlike what was once referred to in a Bangkok newspaper as rural hordes descending on Bangkok, this round shows no such cultural and geographic division. We have students across the board, including in the capital, at the core of this round of protest. Students who were largely apathetic in more recent rounds of anti-government or thinly veiled anti-monarchy protests. We have 14-year-old schoolboys and schoolgirls protesting. So as this situation inevitably becomes more and more tense and explosive, to help walk us through what is going on and what we may expect in one of the largest economies in Southeast Asia, and also, by the way, a key US ally in the region, we have joining us today Professor Viengrat Nethipo from Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, and my colleague, Straits Times Indochina Bureau Chief Tan Hui Yee, also in Bangkok. Many thanks to both of you for making the time to join us today.
Hello,
Wadikap,
thank you,
Ajahn.
sir.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So, Ajahn Viengrat, if I may start by asking you, was the crackdown that we saw in recent days, the use of water cannons and so forth, was that a turning point? Could you sort of explain the dynamics of the situation and what is the mood there at the moment?
Oh, yes, it was. It was a very good turning point, and although we could probably see a lot more turning points in the near future, but because on Friday, October 16, the crackdown made the protester, these inexperienced protester, feel the real sense of fighting, feel the physical real sense of fighting, because they've been participating in on internet for a long while, but this, and also they gather together for a while and quickly. But on Friday, they could sense and they could really tell that the state was their enemy in the physical world. So the dynamic went to, a brief moment of fear, depressing and worried, to the high spirited again within 24 hours. Like on Saturday, many people gather and they did not tell where they would gather until like 1 hour before the gathering time. Several thousand people gather in Lat Phrao, north of Bangkok, which the police force could not came in time before they dispersed within like 8 p.m. And then we all expected that they would rest at least for Sunday. But again, on Sunday, they came and they announced the place of gathering an hour before, while the police force standing by at the Lat Phrao, same as previous day, but they came at the Victory Monument inner side of Bangkok. And we could see even more people gather on Sunday. And not only that site, but also several other sites in Bangkok, as well as other provinces. So in a sense, like they recovered their energy quickly, and they became more energetic. They became more fearless again and restless again. And even on Monday, 3 days after that, they also gather again without telling where to go, until just yesterday that they said, okay, wait for big surprise. And at the end, big surprise was, let's get rest today. Until then, it's like 4 days of gatherings in different places and having more and more people, especially on Sunday. There were so many people. But inside the protesters, there were no particular leaders. Like they called out, everyone was leader, everyone was leader. So in a sense, it had no direction. It didn't have different demands from before, but obviously it had a mood of fighting and fearless and supporting each other. but intellectually, I think they're confused. They started to be confused. They started to ask for what the future would be. What is the best way to solve this? What would it end? So that kind of mood started among the protesters.
I see. Hui Yi, what has been the government's tactics and stance so far? Has it evolved, and if so, how?
Well, Mr. Prayut has said that he is ready to repeal the declaration of serious emergency in Bangkok, and a special parliament session will be held from Monday. That's an important step to lower the political temperature. As you know, last Friday was the first time Thailand deployed water cannons, and that sparked outrage that brought even more people onto the streets. As Ajahn Virat said, the protest leaders have announced many different venues at the last minute, and these demonstrations dispersed within hours, so that it makes it very difficult for the police to keep up. But the police have continued arresting protest leaders after each of these demonstrations. One thing to note is that whenever a venue is announced, the government suspends the metro and SkyTrain services at these places, but it treads a fine line because Thailand's GDP is expected to contract by more than 7% this year, and the government is trying to revive the long-stay tourist market. A disproportionate response to these protests might affect consumer confidence as well as investor confidence.
I see. Chan Viengrat, what are the possible ways? Okay, so there's a special parliament session, so this is a test of parliament, but what are the possible ways out of this which will avoid a violent end like we have seen before, unfortunately? Is there room, critically, is there room for compromise, or is this still seen as a zero-sum game?
Right, good point. I think at the beginning or last week we couldn't see the way out. We couldn't see the possibility for a compromise. But as you know, 7 p.m. today, Prime Minister Prayut just said he would leave the emergency decree soon, but he wouldn't tell. He didn't tell that what or when he would lift the emergency decree. If he lift the emergency decree and start to discuss with some of the leaders, I think that would be the way of compromise. I think by nature, Thai people, they have a tendency to compromise, and I think that one way. And I'm still hope at the parliamentary section, which will be held next week, will be a place to discuss a way, because before they stopped, the proposal of amendment of the constitution, and that made the protesters got more angry and wanted to protest more and demand even more. So that kind of demanding for the government to decide, for the government to stop intimidating students and stop and start to amend the constitution. I think that's possible from discussion. But again, since you asked about zero-sum game, let's look at the government side. I talk about the mood, feeling, and the dynamic of the protesters. Look at the government side or the authority. I think I'm here in Thailand. I couldn't say much about the monarchy, but if you follow the monarchy news, the king and the queen still perform their duty as usual. Like they went to northeastern region and gave a degree to university students and meeting with a lot of people. And we could see that there were many people, 1,000 people wearing red shirt and some wearing a scarf for attending to the king and the queen. So that kind of mood, just like parallel world in Bangkok and in northeastern region, meaning that one of the demands that the protesters had for reforming the monarchy, it doesn't seem to reach any compromising point or going the way that we could see the compromise way out. So if the students keep demanding on this without lower down the demand or changing some items, some subjects inside this demand, there probably will be zero-sum game, and that's difficult to find a possibility.
I see. Fascinating. Hui Yee, back to you. You mentioned the economy briefly, and there have also been parallels drawn between these protests and those in Hong Kong. In fact, tactically, they seem quite similar to Hong Kong. And there's been concern that these may impact the Thai economy like they have in Hong Kong. And of course, the Thai economy is not in good shape anyway because of the collapse of tourism, especially from China on account of the pandemic. So, do you see this having an additional and lasting impact?
Well, in Hong Kong last year, we saw shops being vandalized, petrol bombs being thrown, and police use live bullets. I don't think Thailand is there yet. These demonstrations have largely been peaceful, except for some brief scuffles with royalist groups. And police have come out to debunk rumors on social media that they intend to use live ammunition. The protest leaders are also constantly reminding supporters not to be violent and to stop violence as soon as they encounter it. They are quite aware that the violence will make them lose legitimacy. So there's now going to be, as you know, an extraordinary parliamentary session starting from Monday to discuss the protesters' demand for constitutional reforms. That's an important way to keep the negotiation channels open and to avoid a scenario where protesters feel that they have no options left on the table.
Right. Tan Viengrat, I'll give you the last word, if I may, just for 30 seconds. What do you feel? Do you feel sort of optimistic that this will be worked out? There will be, number one, some genuine reform, which will move Thailand forward out of this cycle.
Yeah, at least I still hope it would be this way. There wouldn't be a call for military force yet, not yet, unlike 2010. So I hope, and the police now realize that using the force to stop the protest just disperse them for a while and even keep them coming back even larger numbers. So I think this lesson should keep the authority to know that the only way is to discuss, to talk, to end it peaceful way.
Tan Viengrat, thank you very much. Kopun Makap, take care of yourself
Thank
out there. Thank you for your time today. And Hui Yee, thank you very much as well. Look after yourself out there. So amid this deepening and clearly escalating conflict, there is some breathing space coming up with the extraordinary session of Parliament. Will have to wait and see if this is a genuine space for discussion and compromise going forward, or whether the two parties, the protesters demanding reform and the government, are as obdurate as they have been thus far in this confrontation. For Asian Insider, I'm Nirmal Ghosh.